The backlash was fierce.
Those comments were somewhat insensitive.
Please, no death is acceptable.
How many disabled people is it acceptable to have die?
Virgin CEO Jane Herdlicker's calls to open up the borders once we're vaccinated, even though some people may die, going down as well as you'd expect.
That is extraordinarily offensive language, and that needs to be called out.
But offensive as the comments are, they're also a brutal reminder that, open or not, Australia will never be fully safe from the virus. Like us, Taiwan was a COVID success story, going 253 days with no local transmission. Now it's fighting its biggest ever outbreak with 335 new cases on Monday alone.
We need to raise the alert level to level 3.
The surge is being put down to slow vaccine uptake, the previous absence of the virus leaving locals little incentive to get the jab. It's a scenario our government is keen to avoid.
I continue to encourage people to move on making their booking to get those vaccinations.
But if minimising the risk of severe illness and death, reducing community transmission and avoiding a fresh wave isn't enough incentive for you, the PM is also dangling a big juicy travel carrot.
To move around when states from time to time might have to put restrictions in place, but also potentially to travel overseas and have different quarantine arrangements on their return.
Morrison hoping to get the states on board with a vaccine passport of sorts, offering travel exemptions for fully vaccinated Aussies.
There's no doubt that the vaccine program is key to our freedom.
So could the freedom to travel be just the ticket to get more Aussies vaccinated and lure us out of Fortress Australia?
Professor Catherine Bennett is Chair of Epidemiology at Deakin University and joins us now. Professor, broadly speaking, can you see these sorts of travel incentives working?
Look, I do think it's important we have incentives. It helps us focus on what's possible once we have the vaccine, both individually, so travel incentives, or even within Australia, some leniency around effects of restrictions or internal borders, for example. I think that's really important because it helps people understand what vaccines do in the way of minimising risks that allows more things to be possible. That then builds rates and hopefully our overall vaccine coverage.
These incentives, you look at what America's doing. They're offering beer, donuts, lottery tickets, even college scholarships. Should we be taking this incentive thing further? Maybe, sausage and bread, for example. That's a starting point, Catherine.
Look, we'd like to focus on healthy foods, thanks, Pete. So, yes.
Sausage and bread is sometimes food. I agree.
Brown bread.
I do think that actually, if we are allowing people to have more freedom because they now have reduced their personal risk, I do think that's a good idea. I don't think we have to resort to paying them or providing them with other benefits. I think that's benefit enough. If you could travel without worrying about the borders closing behind you, I think that would be a good incentive.
Is there a danger, though, that any kind of complacency that may exist now could come back to bite us, like we're seeing in previously successful countries like Taiwan?
Look, that's right. I think there is a risk that we could become so complacent that the rest of the world moves ahead and we're stuck behind. I think we do need to think longer term, think about opening up, and rather than saying, if enough of us gets vaccinated, we might be able to open up, I'd be turning it on its head and saying, we are opening up, we need to have everyone vaccinated by this date.
Well, speaking of opening up, Virgin CEO Jane Herdlicker has copped heat for her "some people may die" comment that she made. She was comparing the risk we accept with other illnesses. I think almost 1,000 Australians died from the flu in 2019 and we had, open borders. The Flight Centre CEO has agreed with her today. Obviously, they have vested interest in the borders being open. But are you as outraged by those comments as some people have been today?
It's really hard. This is what we do and we balance risk all the time, is acknowledge that there will be cases that we can't prevent or there might be deaths, but you have to balance that up against the odds of having illness or deaths due to people being locked out of the country, for example. But we've got to have those big conversations and decide what that looks like, what the plan looks like, and then get everything behind it that we need to have in place to be resilient as we open up.
Catherine, I know it's different for different vaccines and different diseases. Is the science in yet on what level of vaccination we'd need to achieve herd immunity in this case?
Look, that's a really important question, Wiley, because it's not just about percentages. We often hear 60% or 80%, depending on the efficacy of the vaccine. But in fact, it is also about who is vaccinated. And I think at the end of the day, while we strive to get as many people as we can, if we could get 80% vaccinated, we'd be in a good position, even against some of these variants. The reality is it's a sliding scale. And with every additional person vaccinated, we're that bit better off.
So 80% puts you sort of in Gladys Berejiklian territory. That's the sort of figure that she's talking about. When would you, if I'm going to make you the Prime Minister now, when would you open the national border?
I would do it in stages. I would continue with what we started with New Zealand in terms of the bubble. I would be looking at corridors. Obviously, it matters what's happening in the other countries, not just here. And I would be allowing our travellers who have been vaccinated to be amongst the first that we would allow to leave the country for a broader range of reasons. And as I said, it's not just that 80% number. It'll be what it looks like, who's vaccinated, and what we're seeing if we do have any virus in the community, how well we're able to close that down. That will help build confidence with premiers and the Prime Minister, and I think that will then step us out of this more, zero tolerance place we are at the moment.
Catherine, thank you very much for speaking to us again.
Thanks, Waleed.
From expert opinions to in-depth analysis and reporting, the Project YouTube brings you the biggest stories from Australia and around the globe. Hit the subscribe button now for news delivered straight to your feed.